I am convinced as a researcher that I can talk to your audience and say anything I want because they can deny it. But when you start getting close to physical evidence or a key witness, you start feeling pressure. In May of 1997, I was at the UFO Museum, and we got information that a gentleman, that his dad had been stationed here in Roswell in 1947 as a military policeman. His dad was dying of cancer. He had terminal cancer, had 6 months to live. His dad started telling him about being at Roswell. And he had an old footlocker on the floor, and he told his son, he said, open that footlocker. In the footlocker was a piece of metal about the size of a $50 or silver dollar. He said, put it on the nightstand and crumble it up. So he laid it on the nightstand and crumbled it up, and in a few seconds it went back to its original shape. And the father told the son, he said, people will kill over that piece of metal. We need to get rid of it. I talked to the son several times on the telephone, and I started calling him from my residence because I wasn't sure if the phones were tapped at the museum. And I talked to the father one time for about 20 minutes. He said that one of his jobs was to guard the ambulances, and out at the crash site he had seen this piece of metal and reached down and picked it up and stuck it in his pocket. Guarding the ambulances, he was told that if anybody got close to the ambulance, he should shoot them. And he said, Dennis, I don't know if I could have shot another American, but those were my orders. And when they got to the hospital, he said he watched a live being get out of the ambulance with some doctors and walk into the back entrance of the hospital. He described it as childlike and fragile looking. So I made arrangements to go to the state of Oklahoma to meet him and obtain the piece of metal to have it tested. And when I got to Oklahoma and was told that the son was out of town, and I was starting to think that this is a wasted trip, I've been hoaxed, and I shouldn't have come. And about 3:30 the phone rang. It was a woman, and she said to meet him at Denny's restaurant at 7 o'clock. A man and woman walked in, and he said, are you Dennis? I said, yeah. He said, the gentleman you plan on meeting won't be at this meeting. I said, who are you? He said, we're special agents of the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation out of Dallas. I spent 3 hours with him. We talked about UFOs in general. We talked about Area 51. We talked about religion. I hate to say it, but we had a good conversation. For 3.5 hours we talked about this, and it was a good conversation because he had information that I could agree with, in addition to the other information. But when he pulled out drawings of UFOs, I was familiar with what he was showing me. He had a New Mexico map, and we talked about the different crash sites and pointed out the different locations of the crash sites. So I don't want to say there was a camaraderie there, but there was I wasn't totally uncomfortable. I just didn't know why it was happening. He finally told me that the father had decided that the military should have that medal and not me, that the government should have it. After this all happened, I talked to a retired intelligence officer, and he told me that had I got the medal, there's a good chance I'd have never got back to Roswell. If it was real, they would have never let me get back here, which wasn't too comforting, but that was probably a factual statement. The biggest problem I've had with this experience is trying to figure out at the time and determine 10 years later whether this guy with cancer that supposedly was here as an MP ever existed in the first place. But I certainly can chalk it up to experience and can talk about it because what I experienced and what I shared with you happened. And there's no question about it that what I experienced did happen.